You're listening to the Archetype Effect, conversations redefining power, purpose and leadership for women and the coaches who guide them. I'm Ros Cardinal, leadership coach and creator of the Women's Leader Archetypes. Together we'll explore the real stories, the research and reflections that help women rise with clarity and authentic power. When women talk to me about leadership, they rarely start with power or strategy or KPIs. They talk about feeling responsible for everyone. They talk about being exhausted from holding the emotional weight of their team. They talk about wanting to be taken seriously without feeling like they have to harden themselves to do it. And again they tell me, I feel like I'm supposed to lead in a way that doesn't feel natural to me. If that sounds familiar, welcome. You're in the right place. I'm Ros Cardinal, and this is the Archetype Effect. And today, we're beginning a journey into the psychology of feminine leadership, a kind of leadership the world desperately needs, but still struggles to recognise. I want to start with a moment I remember vividly. Years ago, I was sitting in a boardroom, polished wooden table, long agenda, everyone speaking in that clipped, confident tone that signals, I belong here. I belonged there too, technically, but inside I was editing myself. Every sentence, every facial expression, every instinct. If my intuition nudged me to question the direction of a project, I'd reframe it in more acceptable language. If a conversation needed empathy, I'd offer it, but in a controlled and measured way, because too much would look soft. If I had an idea that didn't sound like everyone else's, I'd wait, or I'd water it down. And here's the thing I didn't know at the time. I wasn't alone. Almost every woman I've coached has had her version of that moment, that quiet sense that you're performing leadership rather than inhabiting it. Over the years, I noticed a pattern. Women weren't struggling because they lacked confidence or competence. They were struggling because they were trying to lead inside frameworks that were never designed with them in mind. We're operating in centuries-old models built on competition, separation, emotional distance, and linear decision-making, models shaped in military structures, industrial workplaces, and environments where emotional complexity was considered a liability. But when women lead, we bring intuition, we bring relational intelligence, we bring attunement to people, to risks, to opportunities others don't see yet. We bring emotional fluency, not fragility, but fluency, not chaos, but clarity. And the cost of suppressing that intelligence is enormous, not just for women, but for the organisations that rely on them. I've coached women who were brilliant strategists, but felt compelled to downplay their ideas until someone else validated them. I've coached leaders who could feel the emotional weather of a meeting before the meeting even began, but didn't trust that insight because it wasn't data. I've worked with women whose natural collaborative instincts were misread as indecision, while their male counterparts' unilateral decisiveness was praised as leadership. These aren't personal flaws. These are systemic collisions between the way women naturally lead and the structures that reward a different form of power. Now, when I use the word feminine, I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about a psychological and energetic orientation, one available to all humans, but one that women, both culturally and biologically, tend to access more readily. Here's the feminine leadership values: connection over control, collaboration over dominance, intuition alongside analysis, meaning over metrics, wholeness over hustle. These aren't soft qualities, they're stabilising ones. And neuroscience backs this up. Researchers have found that women often show stronger connectivity between emotional and analytical centres of the brain. In other words, empathy and logic aren't separate domains, they inform each other. Which means women are naturally wired to sense what's happening in the system around them, the subtle shifts in mood, power, safety, belonging. But here's the twist. When the environment doesn't honour this intelligence, it turns inward. What could be intuition becomes self-doubt. What could be attunement becomes overthinking. What could be empathy becomes emotional overload. One of my coaching clients, let's call her Anna, once told me, I can feel everything that everyone in my team is feeling, but instead of knowing what to do with it, I just absorb it. That isn't weakness, it's unchanneled relational intelligence. It's a leadership strength without a framework. And that's exactly why the archetype effect was born. Years ago, I saw the same pattern showing up again and again in my clients. Women with enormous vision who were shrinking themselves. Women with courage and clarity who couldn't break out of the need to protect. Women with deep insight who felt trapped in their own minds. Women with generous hearts who were drowning in the emotional labour of everyone around them. And it dawned on me, these weren't personality quirks. These were archetypes, symbolic patterns that capture something true about how women move through the world. Out of thousands of coaching hours, 2 years of reflection, research and pattern tracking, 4 empowered archetypes emerged. And since 2018, more than 10,000 women have taken the assessment, which gives us an enormous database of rich information about how women lead. But let me introduce them in the way most women first recognise themselves, not through definitions, but through feelings. The sovereign. You'll know her by her vision. She sees possibility long before others do. She creates, she imagines, orchestrates. She speaks in futures, not instructions. And yet she can retreat when she's overwhelmed, drawing back into the castle and closing the gates. The warrior. She's courage, direction, protection. She sees what needs to be addressed and she cannot rest until she moves towards it. Her strength is her clarity under pressure. But when fear creeps in, her shadow becomes control and perfectionism. She tightens her grip, she overworks, she pushes past her own limits. The wise woman. This is our inner knowing. She reads the room without words. She senses patterns. She sees through complexity. Her challenge? She can become the lone wolf, withdrawing, holding everything in her mind, believing that she needs to carry the insight alone. The tribe builder. She is connection, belonging, community. She fosters psychological safety. People thrive around her, but her shadow is overgiving, losing herself in meeting everyone's needs. These archetypes aren't roles. They're energetic patterns. They're ancient, familiar, and deeply human. And every woman has all 4. The question is, which one leads, which one hides, and which one comes out when we're under stress? That's something we're going to unpack across this entire season. If episode 1 is the doorway, episode 2 is where you'll step inside the house and meet them face to face. Whenever I teach this model, women say, Ros, this explains everything. Because once you see these archetypes, you also see the patterns that push them into their shadows. A sovereign retreats when her ideas are dismissed. A warrior becomes controlling when she's expected to prove herself again and again. A wise woman withdraws when no one else sees what she sees. A tribe builder burns out when the team sees her as the emotional glue instead of a leader in her own right. And each of these reactions, these protective patterns, map directly onto our nervous system. When women feel unsupported, unseen, or emotionally unsafe, their archetypes don't disappear. They distort, they armour up, they overcompensate. I remember coaching a senior leader who said, I feel like every day I'm choosing between being who I am and being who the system wants me to be. And that is the heart of feminine leadership psychology. It's not a question of capability. It's a question of congruence. Women thrive when their leadership expression aligns with their internal truth. They falter when they're forced into archetypal contortions, when the system demands warrior energy from a wise woman or unrelenting tribe builder empathy from a sovereign who genuinely needs space to think. That's why burnout is often misdiagnosed in women. It's rarely just workload. It's the psychological cost of leading from an archetype that isn't being supported or isn't being allowed. Here's the most important insight I can offer you today. You don't become a stronger leader by doubling down on your dominant archetype. You become a stronger leader by integrating all 4. A sovereign with a touch of warrior becomes a visionary who executes. A warrior with a touch of wise woman becomes strategic instead of reactive. A wise woman with a touch of sovereign becomes a storyteller who can translate insight into influence. A tribe builder with a touch of warrior becomes a connected leader with boundaries. Integration isn't about becoming everything to everyone. It's about leading from wholeness rather than survival. And wholeness feels very different from hustle. It's steadier, quieter, more powerful. Women often tell me, Ros, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm too much or not enough. I feel balanced. That's the effect of integration. That's the effect of archetypes. Before we close today, I want to offer you a moment to reflect. Where in your leadership do you feel most authentic? Where do you feel like you're performing? Which archetype feels like home? Which one feels far away? And which shadow patterns do you recognise when you're tired, you're stressed, or you're unsupported? Just notice, with compassion. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about understanding yourself, deeply, honestly, without judgment. Because the more you understand the patterns within you, the more powerful and grounded your leadership becomes. This season, we're going to explore each archetype in depth, the empowered expression, the shadow, the nervous system patterns, and how to use each one in your coaching or your leadership. Next week, you'll meet all 4 archetypes, the sovereign, the warrior, the wise woman, and the tribe builder. And I promise, at least one of them will feel like a mirror. Because somewhere inside you, she's already leading. You've just never had the language for her. I'm Ros Cardinal. This is the Archetype Effect. And your archetypal era begins now. Thanks for joining me on the Archetype Effect. If this episode sparked an insight, share it with a woman who leads, or leave a review so more women can find these conversations. Until next time, lead with purpose and power that feels like you.